1613, wherever they're taking more land. This is sort of not exactly a population center, but almost like a debarkation area. You bring your troops here, get them ready to go, and send them out. What we're doing today doesn't reflect that. We're doing a little bit different today. The program we're doing is about rebellion, and there is no 1611 rebellion. There's 1676 rebellion. This is Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon rebels against the royal governor, Berkeley, and it's not a precursor to the American Revolution, which a lot of people used to think it was. Berkeley and Bacon had some serious personal issues, and Bacon was a bit of a hotspur, but that is the first real rebellion in Virginia. So we're covering some of that up front. They're also going to cover the big rebellion, the Civil War, and some things in between. So that's going to be, again, no particular period today, time period, just all about rebellion. So that's why, for example, I'm usually up front in armor in 1611. I'm in 1622 at the Reverend's house today. So, but you'll see a lot of different clothing being worn because we're representing multiple periods. The earliest period we're representing 1611, which is it's Jacobean, King James, but it's actually late Elizabethan. Queen Elizabeth just died in 1603 or 04, and so it's late Tudor, early Jacobean. So that's what I'm wearing. Terry, who was in the hospital, he's a surgeon, and he's late Elizabethan or Jacobean, 1611. The guys you saw up front, some of those guys are 1700s, some of those guys are late 1600s, and they'll tell you if you talk to them what they represent and why they're here. So it's a really good chance to get a view into what rebellion meant at different times, who they're rebelling against. I mean, you say rebellion in Virginia, you think of either Civil War or the big 1776 one. But like I said, Bacon's has nothing to do with any of that. And a lot of people don't know much about it. So if you loop back around, you can talk to those guys and they can tell you more about what was going on then. If you'd like to go in this, hey Terry, we have counselors going to convert down the road. But her conversion here at Henricus leads to her marriage to John Rolfe. And that marriage would have been impossible without her conversion, because what's Rolfe's religion by law? Anglican. He's Church of England. Henry VIII said back in the 1500s, if you're English, you are Anglican, says I. Elizabeth backs that up when she's on the throne. Now James is backing that up. You can't marry outside of your faith. So you are going to be marrying another Anglican. So he can't marry a Muslim, a Baptist, an Anabaptist, a Jew, a Native American woman. He can't do that. But she converts. And that marriage leads to 8 years of peace. They make a big deal about the wedding. Disney's done all kinds of crazy stuff. Jamestown claims it happened there. It didn't. What's that strange noise?
My wife.
I'll tell you what, you can't talk on the cell phone in 1611. It happens all the time. Where was I? The reason the marriage is important is because of what happens afterwards. 8 years of peace. And that ends the first Anglo-Powhatan War that had been going on since 1609. See, we're over here looking for gold, we don't find it. What do we find instead grows well here?
Tobacco.
Exactly. But you can't go out there and grow tobacco with arrows sticking out of you. So you got to have peace. And her marriage to Rolfe brings, like I said, 8 years, and that's when you're going to see things spreading out. The hospital behind you represents the 1614 hospital. 1614 is the year they got married. The peace begins. You're also going to see things like the first English college in the New World. 1619, Henricus College, chartered by King James. It's never completed around, it would have been right over there on the river probably, but it's never completed. It's finally, well, not here. It'll be completed in 1693, quite a bit down the road, literally and figuratively. It's College of William and Mary, but its predecessor is here. But 1619 is right in that 8 years of peace, and other things are going on. The first English ironworks in the New World, also 1619, Falling Creek Ironworks. Ever drive down Route 1 from here toward Richmond, you see Falling Creek Apartments. Don't go in there. But that's where the first English ironworks was. They're trying to make a park out of it, but good luck. So a lot of things are going on between 1614 and 1622 because we're not getting shot at by arrows, and we're also not out there shooting them. And that peace, without that 8 years, there's no beginning of a tobacco economy. And as ironic as it is, because yes, tobacco is evil and kills people, no one knows that, obviously. It's worth a lot of money back in England, and without the time, the peace to go out there, knock down trees, grow tobacco, build a house, grow tobacco, we're not here. It's as simple as that. So her marriage to Rolfe is instrumental in the development of what becomes not just Virginia, but the United States. That's why she's important. And as I said, she was here at Henricus for about 8 months, and this is where she converts. And people don't know that. they think, oh, it all happened at Jamestown. Well, it didn't. And as I was telling this gentleman earlier when he stopped by, if you're writing a history book in the late 1800s about Virginia, you lump it all together, and that's what they did. Because we're 50 miles in a straight line from Jamestown. So, oh yeah, it's all the same thing, right? No, it's very, very different. But this place was, instrumental in the development of what becomes Virginia and then later the United States. I'll go on forever if you don't stop me. But so if you want to walk in here, this is where the minister lived. Now, this house would have been, I don't know, maybe a mile or so from here, half mile, we're not sure where Rock Hall was. This whole area back in the back, it's all called Coxondale. The hospital was over there, probably about a mile. This was over there about a mile. We kind of brought them all together so you don't have to walk. And we don't know what they look like, but this is the type of architecture being used at the time. It's all correct for the time. It's vernacular architecture back in England, and that's what we've done. So if you go in the front door, you can take a left and kind of loop around the big stacked fireplace, and you can go up the steps, and there are 2 bedrooms up there. And this is what it's a good idea of what Whitaker's house would have looked like. He was very important in the community, local government. He would have had a nicer house. He's kind of like minor gentry back in England. And Pocahontas would have actually lived in this house, his house, for those 8 months. So what we interpret the upstairs bedroom on the right as her bedroom, and his is over here on the left. And of course, that she's got another bed up there besides hers, because an English woman would have lived with them as a chaperone, probably an officer's wife or something like that. But feel free to walk in, take a look around. The guy who
3 major rebellions here. All right, so my name is John Pagano. I'm the Historical Interpretation Supervisor. So I'm in charge of all this stuff. So we had some things we planned this year, and one of those programs was this program, Liberty or Death, Rebellion in Virginia, 1675 to 1865. So Virginia is a unique colony and then a unique state, in that there will be more rebellions of note here than any other of the colonies or states. Why is that? Probably because the people who are here, the intellectuals that are here, are the ones that came up with the ideologies, the philosophies, and other items that will give you and me something to think about of why we should be in rebellion. Thomas Jefferson is going to be the most famous, who will say it is good for societies to have rebellions. They should have them. It shakes things up. All right? That's Jefferson. One of the things that Jefferson wrote on is that, well, what rebellion was in a time period when he was kind of, might retire, might not. There's going to be this rebellion in Richmond. It's a slave rebellion. Gabriel Prosper's rebellion. Now, who says that the reaction to Prosper's rebellion was too much? Jefferson did. He said, we need to learn from Prosper. We need to learn from his rebellion. What did it mean? Why did we do that? What happened? So this program we're going to do is going to be based around that. But more than that, because we have living history folks, I want you to see what the rebellion looked like. The 3 men behind me represent the 3 high-noted rebellions of a mass of people, a large group of people. We're going to have Terry over here, who's going to represent 1676, Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion against the Crown representative, Governor Berkeley of Virginia. Right? We're going to have Colin here represent a 1781 Continental Virginian who is in rebellion against King George III. Monarchs do not like when you try to make an independent country from their domain. And then you're going to have Chris here. He represents a Virginian in the middle of the Civil War, where Virginians thought they went through the democratic process of filing a referendum on secession, to which the voting masses approved. They're in rebellion against the United States government off that idea. Is that someone starting this?
Bacon, but okay. Briefly, the weapons. If you have a chance to look over at the A-frame, we've got different weapons that were common to this period. This is about a 1650 style musket. It is what they call a true flintlock, and it has a half-cock safety. It is about a 77 caliber, which is considered small for military use at this time. 77 is about 3/4 of an inch, right? But they wanted you to go down. A lot of times you had problems with flint, especially in this humid weather, so you're still carrying swords. although by this time it's becoming less functional and more of a symbol. Clothing is changing. The wool is still here. We're moving toward the linens. Knee breeches, they're still popular. I won't tell you why. There are a lot of different things. You don't have woolens right now. You don't have the weaving industry. So clothing like these hose are what they call bag hose, and there's a seam up the back so that they fit. But now we've got woven and everything stretches and forms. That's one big difference. When about 1720, you started seeing the woven stuff come in. Broad brim hats are still popular. This is a beaver. Obviously, at this point in time, that's a valuable piece because beaver is starting to peter out. But see more wool worsted stuff coming in. Say about why we're in rebellion.
So the biggest reason why we've joined Nathaniel Bacon is because of on the frontier, we are new planters, and we have land on the frontier. And the savages have attacked the frontier and had laid waste. The governor, we asked him to start and to help protect us, but he did not want to do it. So we believe that his motivations is not based on protecting his colony, but on his own profits. And as new planters, we were not able to afford some of the licenses to trade as well, so we're restricted from trade. So that is our main concern. It appears that the governor does not have the concern. I know that then a few years back, in 1673, I lost my tobacco consignment when the Dutch fleet came in and raided as well. So while the governor and his friends in Jamestown, are wealthy, then at this point, at this point, it appears that he's more interested in himself and not the welfare of the colony. So that's why we're joining the rebellion, both because we had to take matters in our own hand, protect ourselves from the Indians, and as well as economic reasons where it looks like he's favoring his own people.
Yeah, just let the guys over there know. If there's any people crossing the road,
Nothing's really changed. The ignition system, how you got your fire changed over the years. You had to have a primer. You had to put your main charge down. You had to put your ball or shot on top of that and ram it down with a ramrod or scouring stick. So we're ready to fire. Make some noise.
huzzah. Okay, got it. All right. The 17th century. And just to give you a caveat too, does anyone know that the famous document that is going to predate the Declaration of Independence that Bacon put out? Anyone? Who can tell me when the Declaration of Independence was signed? 4th of July 1776, right? July 1776. Well, Nathaniel Bacon is going to produce a document called the Declaration of the Rights of the People in July of 1676. Does that sound familiar? And it's going to have the same type of grievances. Okay? Governor Berkeley, Governor Berkeley, Governor Berkeley, the Crown, the monarchy, the Governor Berkeley, and it's all that. And amazingly, 100 years later, there will be a Declaration of Independence that will sound a lot like that. All right? So, I'm going to introduce you to Colin here. He's going to introduce the idea of what will be the war for that independence.
Yeah.
All right, all yours.
Good morning. My name is Colin Carter, and I'm here representing the 5th Virginia Regiment, also known as Gaskin's Battalion. The regiment existed for roughly 9 months in 1781, and you think to yourself, well, wait, the war was 8 years long. Why did this, Virginia Continental regular troops only exist for 9 months? Well, the answer is very simple. It's called money, finances, and material. In the Revolutionary War, Virginia raised 15 Continental regiments starting in 1776. And as the war dragged on, those regiments got smaller and smaller and condensed. And basically what ended up happening is the British war effort, which had mostly focused in New York and Pennsylvania and the middle colonies, looked at South Carolina and said, that's a really great opportunity for us. And so we're going to shift the war on down there. Washington, realizing that the war was shifting focus, sent the Virginia line, which had about 8 to 9 regiments at that time, down to a lovely port city called Charleston. And in May of 1780, the British laid siege to Charleston and captured the entire North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia Continental lines. So all of the professional troops of the South are now POWs. And this will be the largest capture of any American field army until the fall of Bataan in World War II. All right, it is significantly blow to American morale, material, and the war effort. So Virginia in May and June of 1780 looked at each other and say, all right, we need to raise significant amounts of troops. We need to outfit them again. And what ends up happening is they designate 5 regiments to be re-raised. But they're out of volunteers. The Continentals at the time were all volunteers. So what do you do when you need troops and you don't have volunteers to make those regiments? Conscription. You go down the militia list where everyone from 16 to 60 who's a male is enrolled in the militia. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the Virginia regiments of 1781, which 2 were raised in late 80, the 1st and 2nd Virginia detachments, which fought in North Carolina at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, very well equipped, very well armed, very professional looking organization, did a lot of great service. And then you get to May of 1781 and you get Gaskin's Battalion, which is designated the 5th Virginia Regiment. It has about 670 to 700 men. A very large regiment for the time period when most combat units were about 300 or so. The regiment, however, has a severe problem in getting clothes, munitions, and the only thing we can document that these guys actually received from Congress, from the actual Continental Army, were guns with bayonets. They got wooden canteens and knapsacks. And everything else, the state of Virginia had to supply these guys. And so they are raised in April and May of 1781. They are out west in if you're familiar with Point of Fork, they're out there with von Steuben. There's a Continental Army depot out there. And Cornwallis brings the war into Virginia. And the majority of the reports for how these guys are clothed are in linen overalls and shirts. And we think they had linen jackets made out of blue cuffs and blue facings. Notice I'm not wearing the traditional regimental coat, and that's because there is no supplies. There is no wool left in Virginia. Linen's about the only thing these guys are getting. And throughout the entire returns of the regiment, the guys have no shoes, the guys have no pants, the guys have nothing to wear. And they fight in 3 actions during the war. The Point of Fork, they're involved briefly at Green Springs, and then they're mostly used as a labor battalion at Yorktown to dig the trenches. On the first day of the action there, they are digging trenches, and on the last day of the war, when the drummer boy comes up on the ramparts and signals the end of the siege, they're in the trenches digging again, and the majority of their war is doing hard labor in marching and just being there. It is not a really professional force, but they're conscripts, they're average Virginian troops. And the weapon, though, is the standard Continental arm. It is a French 1763 Charleville. The French sent over between 50 to 70,000 of these weapons. And they were instrumental in winning the American independence. The regiment itself had a collection and a wide variety of these, Brown Bess muskets, captured Hessian weapons, Dutch muskets, Committee of Safety. But they all worked the same way. But it made ammunition and logistics quite a problem for these guys. And I'm going to demonstrate how this weapon works. It's very similar to what Terry had. And then in the next evolution for the American War Between the States, you'll see the ignition system does change. All right. Any questions?
Revolution was a guy named Light Horse Harry Lee. Does that name sound familiar? Yep. Right, we were talking about the bloodline of General Robert E. Lee. So when we think about the Revolution, we think about what will become the Civil War. When Robert E. Lee says directly, secession is nothing but revolution. And he was not exactly a fan of it. But Virginia did secede from the Union. And so we're now at the point of 1861 to 1865, where a lot of these Confederate soldiers from Virginia, their grandfathers, sometimes their fathers, depends how old they are, were with Colin there. So the question is, what changed? Well, we can't get into all that too much, but we are going to see the difference physically of what the soldiers from Virginia looked like in the Civil War. And Chris here is going to give you a good description of those things.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Atkinson, and I'm going to represent my second great-grandfather, Obadiah Franklin Atkinson, who served in the 15th Virginia Infantry, which is out of Hanover County. Anybody here from Hanover? No? Henricus? Huh?
Ancestors.
Ancestors? Okay, very good. So he served in the 15th Virginia Infantry, and it was called the Hanover Grays. He would enlist. It would be late 1864, and he would serve to the end of the war. When the war ended in 1865. So John made an interesting note last night when he was giving a lecture on these three different time periods that approximately 150,000 Virginians served during the American Civil War, served for Virginia between 61 and 65. About 30,000 would be killed in action over that 4-year lifespan or 4-year period, and about another 30, maybe 40,000 were wounded. So you would think that all the servicemen who enlisted in Virginia between 61 and 65, about 2/3 of them were killed in action, died of illness, or were wounded. So those are very, very high numbers in comparison to the Revolutionary War as well. A lot of things changed in just less than 100 years as far as the looks of troops in the American Civil War. What I'm wearing today is probably a good depiction and representation of what a Virginia soldier would have looked like in 1862 and even in 1863. Like Colin here, he's pretty much wearing all linen. I don't have that luxury right now, so what I'm wearing is called jean wool. My jacket and trousers, which is kind of the precursor to modern day jeans. It's a mixture of wool and cotton that's blended together. It's very breathable. The clothing is very loose-fitting, unlike during the Revolutionary War time period. The clothing, the trousers, the breeches, the shirts, the jackets, the frocks are very, very tight-fitting. That was just the style of the times. In the 1860s, civilian clothing, military clothing, and uniforms was patterned after the French. French style was very popular during that time. So the jacket that I'm wearing right now is patterned after a French military jacket. This particular jacket was called the Richmond Depot Type 2 jacket. It was produced in Richmond. So the South had an abundance of cotton, a little bit of wool, so they mixed the two together. They would manufacture these coats in Richmond from the Richmond Depot and distribute it to the Army out in the field. Same with my trousers. They're just very loose-fitting trousers, mule ear pockets. I'm wearing braces underneath. The shirt I'm actually wearing is a British issue shirt. So Britain was an ally of the Confederate States of America during the time of the Civil War. They didn't provide troops, but they did provide uniforms, clothing, and also firearms and accoutrements as well. The brogans that I'm wearing, a little bit more sturdier than my great-grandfathers during the American Revolution. These are also British as well, British issue. Okay, some of the stuff I'm wearing as far as accoutrements. A leather black accoutrement belt that holds my cap pouch for my primer caps that ignites my weapon. I have a cartridge box for my round. I have a scabbard that's for my bayonet to sit inside. I have a canteen for water. I have a linen haversack, a muslin haversack to carry my rations in, and I'm wearing a backpack to carry my bedding and maybe an extra shirt, a pair of socks, and so forth. I don't have it with me right now as far as the headgear. There was a thing called a kepi, which is a small piece of fabric on your head and had a leather brim or a cardboard brim. Similar to a ball cap, but didn't provide a lot of shade to the soldiers and protection from the elements, so many of the soldiers preferred the slap pit. Civilian made, they could buy it from a seller, they could wear it from home or buy it in the store. The biggest difference between weapons, Civil War and the Revolutionary War, this is a British Infield musket. It's a 58 caliber musket, and like my grandfather, what he's using over here for the Charleville, that is a smoothbore musket. This is a rifled musket. So in other words, there are lands and grooves that are bore into the musket itself. This is the mini ball that I use, and what happens when the gun goes off, this mini ball will grab those lands and grooves and start to spin. So it increases my accuracy from about 50, maybe 75 to 100 yards with a smooth bore up to about 300 yards with the rifled musket. The weapons changed, advanced, but the tactics didn't, and that's why you saw such a higher casualty rate during the American Civil War. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load and fire the musket right now. There's about 9 to 10 different steps. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm going to visually show you how they did it. Okay?
One thing we apologize for today, and with our COVID requirements for Chesterfield County, normally our site will hand you everything we have. Bullets, muskets, we're like, here, hold it, it's fun. Yeah, here you go. We just can't do that today. We apologize for that. Just give a loud warning, Chris. There's a lot of kids around.
Firehead.
Firing!
That's it.
All right, thank you. On the ocean, and you're trying to get a projectile into the side of a ship at a quarter mile, right? And you're trying to hit that space when the ship that's a quarter mile away is doing this every 3 seconds. And you've got to now, and you guys who are in school, tell me what math we're dealing with. You have to take a shot out of that is moving on a plane that is changing about every 1 to 3 seconds. And you're trying to intersect a point that you are now timing it. So if you know the projectile coming out of that travels at about 1,000 feet per second, you now have to do the calculation of where that ship is moving in that 1,000 feet per second. You have to gauge, is it 1,000 feet or is it 1,200 feet? And if it's 1,200 feet and within that millisecond, how much is that target change? Are you starting to get the idea of the mathematics now?
Yeah, we're still up in the...
So if you're ever in the modern military, you're in the past military, you're in the futuristic military, usually people who are experts in the artillery are math nerds.
He hasn't done the drill in a while, so...
Copy, never mind. Thanks for
If you're back a long time ago and you're into cavalry, you just need to be horse nerds. Infantry, well, there's no other term for that. If you're into building stuff, you're an engineer, that's where the money's at. And the prestige. What do you think, what kind of school was West Point created to become? An engineer school, right? All right, getting there. One thing I do ask is that for my staff, most of the people you see behind me, most of us are the Henricus staff. My name is John, I'm the Historic Site Supervisor. What we're actually doing could lead to the death or dismemberment of us for real in this demonstration, right? So keep in mind we're using a real charge of black powder that's the equivalent of a small hand grenade, right? All right. So what
Remember,
we're gonna do,
if you blow me up, I can't put you back together, okay?
not even with staples, right?
Okay.
All right. So we're going to be doing this program is basically going to be our cannon firing program. Whether or not you're in the 17th century, the 18th century, and to some degree in the 19th century, that cannon over there is the typical type cannon that will fire at your opposing force on a battle on land or on the ocean. This cannon that we're using today is actually a gun from a naval ship. A naval ship. I want you to imagine sailors crewing this on a ship that is pitching like this in the ocean trying to hit a target. On land, it's a lot easier to use. Unfortunately for Virginia, there's woodlands. So you got to clear out lanes to fire, right? The other problem you have, whether it's on the ocean or whether it's on land, is that you have to be trained. If you're firing this gun, somebody on your crew is just having a bad day. They didn't get their beer ration, or they got a bad letter from their sweetheart. You don't want that, because this cannon involves focus. It requires a crew of several people who have to work as a team to get it to fire safely. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you want to send a projectile that way that'll hit your enemy, or at least scare your enemy. So there'd have to be somebody nearby that would be able to train them. That person might be called a gunner, right? Somebody who has a title of training. I can train you. So for us today, that's going to be Terry right there. He's going to be in charge of the crew that's going to manage to fire this gun. The first thing we're going to show you is the teamwork of what it would require these men to learn to do, first without really firing it. The second time we do this, we will be firing it. So what I want you to do when you watch them do this teamwork here is to say, where in here would I screw up? And where might I blow my friends up? All right? Pay careful attention, because if you're one of the crew, you're not worrying about this thing going a half a mile away and striking something. You're worrying about operating the gun. The guy who's worrying about where it goes and what it hits is the guy behind it who's going to teach these men to use it. All right, so what I'm going to do is turn it over to him in a second, and we're going to go through the drill. All right, any questions before we begin? All right, what you're going to see is a 17th century drill, and we're going to start that in just a moment. There you go.
All right, gunners, have a care. Stall the piece. Search the piece. Yeah, we're not going to go boom this time. Next time. Sponge the piece. What he's doing now is he's getting that wet casers and ember in there. We don't want to put black powder in there if there's a hot spot. All right, at this point, we are prepared for the firing. I'm going to act as what they call the powder monkey. I'm bringing the powder up to him. Load the piece. Ram home the charge. Prick and prime. So what he's doing now, we've got the charge all the way back, and he has now taken his thumb off, which was preventing oxygen from getting into it, setting it off. And he's going to poke a hole in the charge, make sure the vent is clear, followed by priming the vent hole. That's going to make sure I've got a powder train that'll lead down to that charge, so that when my next command, which is Lindstock,
What's your command?
give fire. At this point, we would get a bang if we did everything right. If we did everything wrong, maybe not, or maybe a bad bang. So we're going to go through this now with a charge. So this time it's going to make some noise, guys. Stall the piece. Search the piece. He's looking to make sure there's nothing in there that could be a problem. Sponge the piece. Get rid of any embers. Advancing the charge. Towards the breach. Ram home the charge. This is the point where I would aim the piece to make sure it's going to hit what I'm going for. All right, prick and prime. Give! Fire!
I mean, I'm talking about